Oh hey, didn't see you there. Have you noticed how strict job requirements have gotten? I need to be a part of a pre-existing franchise but have nothing in common with it, and I need at least a 74 on Metacritic. Man, I'm never gonna get this job. Who's the next best candidate? Soul Hackers 2 is the latest JRPG outing from Atlus, following up Shin Megami Tensei 5, Persona 5, Persona 5, Persona 5 Normal, and it really gets us anticipating their next swing for the fences. Directing for the game was handled by Mitsuru Hirata and Eiji Ishida, who has a fair amount of experience under their belt, including Tokyo Mirage Sessions. However, what it is lacking is work on the first Soul Hackers game. No, I don't need to call Ronald McDonald over here. I'm more than capable of making McDonald's 2 on my own without the help of some clown. There was concern bringing back the Soul Hackers series after such a long time, which is a subset of the Devil Summoner series, which itself is a spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei series. Okay, you know what? This is going to get confusing, so let's just start from the start. Okay, so in 1987, there was a game called Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei Devil Summoner, which somehow did make people think it was satanic, but Dungeons and Dragons is. Okay, so Persona is that game series with the bear and Hitler, and now we're at Soul Hackers 2. I didn't mind going in detail on that because that rambling can double up as a school project and a wedding speech. The concern for bringing back an old property was warranted because it definitely was a relatively niche game even in comparison of other properties within the Megami Tensei umbrella, but there was also concern that the new gameplay mechanics and aesthetic introduced into the sequel would make original fans unhappy. And while we'll get to that in a bit, there is a tad more development that I would like to talk about. Like how the manga artist for the first Ruby manga was a primary character designer, which also happens to be the Ruby manga that I honestly aesthetically like the best. Little worlds collide moment right there for me. You can actually see the similarities in designs. Both sets of characters have faces. Reception was definitely on the miss side. It seems like the common consensus was the game was hardly a dose of okay. A lot of people say the character is good. Gameplay, it's certainly there. There are other people who praise the game very strongly and people who warn their friends about it when they see it walking across the street. Holy f***, that game has legs. While the defenders of this game have their own reasons for doing so, as well as the people who dislike it, I feel like there are expectations for this game that split into multiple different identities that it just isn't. This isn't an intense nail-biting controller throwing experience like mainline Shin Megami Tensei games, which I swear grows more powerful every time someone cusses while playing them. At least that's what I heard SMT games are like. I don't have a lot of experience with them. This also isn't trying to be a fun to explore dungeon social experience of the Persona games, or whatever the first Soul Hackers was like. This is its own experience that when taken out on its own, and given its own chance to breathe and have its own identity, is honestly a really solid experience. The expectations are understandable based on the fact that Shin Megami Tensei 5 came out relatively recently and Persona 5 comes out in every year that has the month of January in it. Enough about the meta information though. What is Soul Hackers 2? What's it like? The gameplay, the story, all of that saucy stuff. Well, let's start off with the characters, like Ringo, who wears the opposite of fingerless gloves. If there's one giant takeaway from this game, if every other part of this game is considered bad or a failure, I would love nothing more for more characters like Ringo, nope, to become a hell of a lot more common, at least in Atlus games. She's far from a silent protagonist with her own thoughts, feelings, backstory, personality, and I really love it. Who knew the perfect recipe for a main character was for them to have character? But to go to the plot for a second, cause it's needed to explain the characters in the plot I guess, there's a super high level artificial intelligence known as Ion who predicts the end of the world with, I don't know, a Google search. But to solve the problem are two human manifestations of Ion who are made to directly interfere with what the suspected causes of that whole apocalypse thing that the whole not dying community is worried about. Which is the death of this arrow guy and the scientist guy, which we are trying to prevent. But this is where the namesake of the game comes from, where we soul hack into this guy and bring him back to life and continue our investigation. Yeah, without this gimmick, the game would just be called 2. This is actually a similar process of how we meet the other party members of this game. Someone catches a bad case of dead, and it's bad, we bring them back. Boom, boom, the game party members have gathered. Which goes into Soul Hackers 2 tip number 1. Want whimsical adventures? Check out a cemetery! Honestly, one of the things that surprised me the most as one of those good old JRPG players is the fact that you pretty much have your full party of Ringo, Fig, Arrow, Melody, and Saizo just a few hours into the game. I think I figured out why other Persona fans dislike it. Jealousy. Jokes aside, I think it lends itself well into being able to show the characters naturally grow together and bond and all that good stuff. It gets the introduction side of things out of the way, like proposing when you get a match on Tinder. I know we are moving fast here, but I'm trying to speed run here. While the party is limited, they make up for it in character quality. We have Ringo, who I talked about before, that just opens and leads with so much personality and attitude, but is never overwhelming. And her nature as a relatively new entity leads itself well into standing middle ground on a lot of character differences, along with Fig a lot of the time. Which rolls us into the dynamics that these characters share, and well, I definitely wouldn't describe anyone here as lifelong friends, I mean technically real life, but it creates multiple comparisons between characters that just spark a good old interaction machine. We got our end-of-class clubs that have their opinion on the apocalypse. We have Arrow, who's a member of Yatakarasu, who's against that whole reality coming to a close thing. Man, what a nerd, am I right? And we have Melody, that thinks the whole species living is pretty cringe and is a member of the group called Phantom Society that wants to bring about the end of the world. We also have Saizo, who's a free agent, a freelancer, so we get interactions based on Arrow and Melody's difference as well as Saizo's indifference. But we have Saizo's rich taste in the finer things in life, like, I don't know, extra guacamole on the side. That's why he's green, there you go, theory confirmed. But we have the more humble Arrow, who's never even heard of guacamole. That's not canon, I am just committed to this example that doesn't exist. Okay, but now we have a spectrum here, and I want to figure out where the rest of the cast members fit onto the whole knowledge of guacamole thing. It's these relationships that really breathe a lot of life into the game, because as a party, these differences have to be overcome, whether that be a mutual understanding or a hey, let's just not talk about it, right? Because the whole greater good thing, vengeance thing, or well, I'm still into my ex and we can stop along the way, right? I joke about Saizo's character arc, but his story with his love interest Ash is probably one of the most engaging in the plot. Well, I don't think they're engaged, I don't even see them on a relationship speedrun leaderboard. And these characters get an optional backstory that doesn't break the story without it, but it adds a metric load of context to who they are. And you can find that optional, not so optional if you know what's good for you dungeon, the Soul Matrix. Ever since our whole resurrection thing, our protagonist Ringo and the rest of the cast are pretty linked to each other. And that means we can explore our friends' minds in the form of a dungeon instead of going to therapy. Hey, one is free, the other isn't covered by my insurance. I think I know the right choice. Going through this dungeon can give you looks into each of our resurrected party members' memories, and it also gives them bonus abilities the more you go through it. I like it, except for the two issues of holy hell, this looks boring after a while. We have an entire franchise based on dungeons that are based off of someone. Couldn't we have, like, added a potted plant somewhere? But we also have the issue where the way you unlock deeper into the Matrix is by picking the right dialogue choices or specific hangouts to add to your friendship-o-meter. And if you misplace too many points in one person, you basically lock yourself out of the true ending of this game. Guess what I found out the hard way? Guess what I never went back to fix? It also doesn't help that the Soul Matrix is a bunch of hallways at best and a map that I never completely went through at worst. It's just so damn boring, and it feels like these dungeons were designed to get as much playtime as humanly possible, which is a sentiment that goes a bit into the other dungeons. Like, I feel like this could have to do with the budget or a time issue or anything like that. I will say sometimes I like how things were handled. This obviously wasn't a AAA game to Atlas. Not counting the company logo, there's only one A on the case, so I get it. But for a dungeon crawl where all you can do is lock and bonk, they fit some neat puzzles in. Like this one where if you walk through door type A, that closes all door type A's, and to open them you have to go through door type B, and you gotta make it to the obvious end of the area. Is it innovative? Probably not, but it worked. Can't say that about everything though. There's a part where you have to make a selection on where to go, and you get a bunch of different options, but in between each option is a separate loading screen, and here's a chunk of footage of me just looking up a guide because I was just really fed up with trying to guess. Please don't put loading screens in your puzzles, please. And to place a treasure chest or loot though, your demons fly around at the start of the dungeon and kinda just hand you stuff they find. I get that for believable locations, it would be weird if there's a giant wooden chest in the back room of a grocery store, but it kinda harms the feeling that I'm the one exploring here. But what would a dungeon crawler be without some battling? And let me tell you, out of every turn-based game I've ever played, this is one of them. If you're aware of the Shin Megami Tensei way of doing things, you got some demons that have certain attacks that are strong, weak, or anywhere in between those two words against different enemies, and well, try to go for the weaknesses for whatever bonuses the game provides, which in this case is a Sabbath. Alright, which one of you put religion in my anime game? Come on, come on. Basically, if you strike weakness, one of your demons gets added to a stack that attack all at once at the end of your party's turn. And I'll be honest, it's really fun trying to get that number as high as possible with abilities that stack extra demons into the mix. But with only 4 party members counting our lead, surely that would limit the party composition and customization, practically making every playthrough and experience the same, right? Psh. Are all your rhetorical questions gonna need an answer? This is probably me showing my only experience of Persona and, Yokai Watch apparently, but it was a pleasant surprise to see that not only could I swap my own demons as Ringo, but pretty much the entire party was up for whatever customization you wanted. Characters could use whatever element or serve whatever role you want as long as you gave them the proper demon and proper upgrades to go that route. It seems like characters have a bit of their own nature preference, but if you want to be a cruel god and make the mean-spirited person with a red color scheme use ice, who's going to stop you? It's you playing God after all. You know, that explains the Sabbath thing now at least. As much as I would love to slap a ball on this puppy, I can't not mention the issue of DLC this game has. Basically, a whole story chapter for pretty much party member, its own dungeon, and all that stuff is put behind a paywall, which was available day 1, instead of just being put in the damn game! And that also doesn't change the overpriced costumes that are only shown in battle, and the only way to get any outfits is a DLC, despite the fact that it takes up a whole item slot. It would have been nice to at least have some form of unlockable, not even unlocking the DLC costumes, but something so a part of the menu wasn't basically just an advertisement. It makes a small scale game with a bit of soul haha hackers feel that much more soulless and put under that much more scrutiny. And as someone who wants to defend this game, it's very reasonable to be upset about that. Hell, I never even got any of these DLC because I don't want to support this practice. Yeah, I have standards. Atlas, you either start accepting cash and set a debit or you're never gonna see any of my money. Is Soul Hackers 2 the worst experience I ever had? No, of course not. Is it the best game of all time and everyone should be singing its praise? Last time I checked, that game was called Rock, Paper, Scissors, Gun. But what we have in this game is a very solid experience that I feel like once a lot of the heat dies down will be considered a gem of its time, just with some unfortunate choices made. And I look forward to it getting that kind of appreciation. Though it probably shouldn't have been pitched as a sequel to an old franchise when it's kind of nothing like it, but hey, what do I know? Wait a second. The job requirements for this wasn't to make a biased review, it was to pick a dumb hill to die on. I think we need to increase the amount of DLC. I think everything should be behind a paywall. I think games should be behind a paywall.